Hi, good morning, Greta, and good morning to all of our viewers. We are so excited to be here for another author series live stream, and today we are interviewing Greta Gorsuch. And we actually featured Greta's book in one of our spring classes, our class Writing for Rookies, and our students loved her book, The Cell Phone Lot, so we were just so excited to have her here. And also thank you to our live stream sponsor, Southwest 66 Credit Union. So good morning, Greta. I want to go ahead and start off by just asking you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your history in and experiences in adult literacy and English language learning.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Was really glad to hear from you and, join these live streams. And ever since I found out about your live streams, I've been trying to join them. Whenever something comes up, for example, there was a very interesting project that you had going on, maintaining your mental health in very difficult circumstances. And I joined that one. And so anytime I see a notice about one of these live streams, I go to it and I try to see what's going on.
We've
Except
really
for the
appreciate your
tax, yeah, except for the tax preparation one. I was like, nah, I'm not going to watch that. Yeah. So,
um,
but thanks for having me. I'm Greta Gorsuch. Um, I live in Lubbock, Texas. I've been here since 1999, and there's the clock in the background. And my husband and I arrived here from Tokyo, Japan. We'd been teaching and living there for me for 14 years, my husband for 25 years. And I got a job at Texas Tech University, and we came here. I'm an applied linguist. So coming to adult literacy is a bit late to me in my career, but I've been interested in materials design and materials writing and also adult literacy probably since the time I was in my late 20s. So for some 30 years, a bit more than that. And I was getting a master's degree in Vermont. I was living in Japan and then getting a master's degree in Vermont. I know it's complicated, but an adult literacy specialist came and talked to us. And the one thing he said really, stuck with me for years, which was, all kinds of people don't know how to read. And you'd be surprised. I mean, they are all shapes, all colors, all circumstances, native English speakers who just never got the knack of reading. And he said the big problem is materials that are good for learners at these various levels. And yeah, you can get children's books, but they're patronizing.
mhm.
They're written for kids. And so, we have these adult literacy learners over the age of 15 in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they need interesting things to read about people like them or topics that interest them.
Yeah.
So, about 3 years ago, I guess, I was on an extended trip. I'm a huge camping fanatic, so I travel very long distances to go camping. And I stopped in every store, every convenience store and restaurant, family restaurant, on the way from here all the way to Eastern Tennessee one winter. It was a winter trip, and got local newspapers. I wanted to find out what people were worried about. What are they talking about? What are they celebrating? What are they worried about? And I met people and had conversations and read these local newspaper stories too, and got ideas from that and just simply started writing.
Oh, okay. So all of your published books you've written within the last 3 or so years.
For adult literacy, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, I know we included the link to Greta's website, so anyone who's interested in kind of checking out her books and purchasing them, go ahead and check in the text of the video and follow that link to see more. Um, so when you started writing, had you ever done any writing in the past, just not actually published books, or
Well, I've
was
always,
it new to you?
yeah, okay. I've always been a writer. But the writing and I've always been a materials writer, so there's kind of a difference. So, for my profession, I have to write professionally for applied linguistics research. I'm a testing specialist, among other things. But I've always been a materials writer. And that means that, when I lived in Japan or Vietnam, that I would write listening materials. That was kind of my interest because that's what was needed by learners in those contexts.
Mhm.
And so I was sort of experimenting for years with these long listening extracts. So instead of, thinking, oh, students can only listen to really short extracts because more than that is a strain, English will overwhelm them. I didn't find that to be true. And then I started writing longer and longer, almost narratives that were listening extracts, dialogues between people. So I've been doing that since maybe the mid 90s. Um, and then after I moved here, I had to really do a lot of more professional writing, not materials writing. So clearly I missed it. And so wanted to get back into writing, stories that are worthwhile, these literacy stories. And above all, I wanted the teachers themselves to find it worthwhile reading, not just
Yeah.
the students. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of touched on this in terms of why it's important to kind of gear your writing towards these individuals and make sure that there's materials that are appropriate for them. But can you share a little bit more about why that's so important in terms of keeping readers engaged and holding their interest?
Right. Well, the end goal is for all learners to become independent readers.
Mm.
And I've discovered early on that one key to doing that is helping learners increase their reading fluency. And that really means, in very technical terms, that they can read and identify accurately and quickly words,
Okay.
particularly words they might not completely understand yet. But when people are fluent readers, it's not this ordeal to read in a foreign language.
Mhm.
So if we can develop learners' fluency skills, reading fluency skills through texts that are fairly easy to read, that will encourage them to seek out titles that they want to read for themselves. They'll become better readers. So if someone has poor reading fluency, if I were to read Japanese, I would have to struggle and you'd give up after about a minute because you just can't. There's certain words you don't know and you just kind of give up and it's this ordeal. But if people are more fluent readers to begin with, they can move on very quickly to more difficult texts that have like higher vocabulary density or more unknown words.
Mhm.
um, they can move on to those very quickly and actually be more successful reading those texts, not feeling I have to know that word right now. They can kind of figure it out what it means and go back to it.
Yeah.
You have to need good reading fluency first. And so you need to begin with texts that are a bit easier with shorter sentences, partly. But if there's going to be an unusual word like rattlesnake, I write about Texas, rattlesnake is going to come up. But if I write and if I have a story that has kind of unusual terms in it, like, rattlesnake or driver app or think words like that, I make sure that those appear and reappear
Okay.
because that would normally happen in someone's spoken narrative anyway. We return to ideas all the time. Our conversations even are very recursive, which means themes return and return and return and come up. So, yeah, so I try to make sure that these dialogues and these narratives are what people actually say
Yeah.
and what they
And I,
actually do with language.
yeah, and I think there tends to be a focus on just kind of verbal or conversational fluency, and I think people don't really think about how essential reading fluency is.
Yeah.
Um, would you say that reading fluency is just as important as conversational or verbal
Oh,
fluency?
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, books are the most durable, reliable, interesting source of input that we can have in a foreign language or a second language, or even our first language. Books are always there. Um, Conversations are not. And so when we can crack the code on books, if we can decode fast and accurately in a language, that book is always there, and it's there for us to dip into as we like, take from it what we like, just gain experience with the foreign language and get worthwhile ideas from it.
Sorry, excuse me.
Mhm.
So I know you kind of mentioned shorter sentences and repeating ideas. What are some of the other things you kind of keep in mind when you're writing specifically for these types of learners?
Right. Um, the greatest obstacle to reading fluency and feeling great about what you're reading, but just that feeling of ease and enjoyment, is unknown vocabulary. For many years, it was thought that it was complex grammatical constructions. It's simply not the case. We found through research I've done and research that others have done. It's not grammar. Um, it has to do with what we call vocabulary range. So when you're learning a second language or a foreign language, there's a certain body of words that we use over and over and over again. They simply occur frequently in natural language use. Once we get into stories, narratives, it's actually through stories that even L1 first language learners acquire vocabulary. It's believed that college students going to college in their own countries do more reading. They may be acquiring up to 100 to 200 new words a week
Oh, wow.
through reading, right?
Mhm.
So it has to do with vocabulary. So there's a lot of experimentation going on in English as a foreign language research to simply have what's called narrow reading, or simply constraining the range of vocabulary that you're drawing from. And so rattlesnake would be not a frequently occurring word, whereas door would be. Lizard is actually used a lot more in English than rattlesnake. I don't know why. You can get lists of this stuff that show the 1,000 most commonly occurring words in language, the second 1,000 most commonly occurring words in language. And so I pay very close attention to that.
So we got great feedback from our students who read your book, The Cell Phone Law. A lot of them really enjoyed the story and appreciated how relatable it was. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what inspired you to write that story in particular?
Yeah. Um, I'm glad you mentioned that. This was the first book story that I wrote. Um, and at the time, Uber and Lyft had become really, big. The time I was writing this story or thinking about it. And it was also the first year I had a smartphone. I'd never had a smartphone before. Didn't even have a smartphone 6 or 7 years ago. And so we needed to get to the airport. So I used Uber, I signed up, and a man picked us up to take us to the airport from our house. And it was this beautiful gold colored Chevy Suburban. It was absolutely gorgeous. And he was this lovely man, the driver, and he was talking to us very gently all the way out. We were kind of nervous about our flight. It was going to be a long trip. We were going to Turkey,
Oh,
and not Turkey, Texas, Turkey, the
Turkey,
country.
the country.
And it transpired through his conversation that he had fallen on seriously hard times and he had a family to support. And he was a youth minister as well. And his wife wasn't able to work for a reason we didn't find out. And he said, really, there's a cell phone lot out at the Lubbock International Airport. We're like, there is? He said, yeah. And he pointed it out to us. And sure enough, when you drive by the airport, which is in the middle of nowhere, there's this little restroom and there's a picnic table and there's some trees. And there are 5 or 6 people sitting around that pretty much all the time. They're all Uber drivers. And for one reason or another, they're needing extra money, right? Maybe they never made it back from the 2009 financial crisis, or someone in the family got sick. And also, they just need extra money. They're saving up to send their kid to college and don't want the kid to get this huge debt
Yeah.
by the time they graduate. And so the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers just go to this picnic table, they share food. He was telling us all about it. So it was from him
Yeah.
that I got this story. And then I created my own characters.
Oh, okay. That's such a neat background. Would you mind, without giving too much away, share just a little bit about what the storyline of the book is?
Yes, Jessica Vasquez, the heroine of this story, is a young Hispanic woman, the black sheep of her family. Her father came from Mexico without speaking any English, but has made this really successful painting business, house painting business. And I've met so many really strong entrepreneurs coming from Central and South America and also from Mexico, who've come to this part of Texas and made good simply through hard work. So Jessica clearly is close with her father, but the rest of her family wants her to be different and better than she is. But she ends up getting a cosmetology degree, and that's like, no, that's nothing. But she's very good at it, and she works for a national chain of drugstores, helping people, make decisions about skincare. And she gets um, the owner's daughter, who should not be working there, is nasty piece of work, Cassie, blonde with pink lipstick, just not a very nice person. Um, and she puts stolen goods into Jessica's bag and gets her fired because Cassie wants the job. Cassie's no good at it, though. She keeps stealing things. So Jessica's got to figure out what to do with her life because all of a sudden she's in debt. She has a fast car. She lives in this expensive apartment building. She doesn't have money because
Yeah.
she's lost her job. So she takes on work as an Uber driver, but we call it ride. It's not Uber. We couldn't say Uber. Yeah, but
Well,
she becomes a gig worker, and then she makes good. Her father starts to help her. He has this big car that he bought for his wife, who passed away, and so they switch cars, and she gets to drive this big car, and she meets friends at the cell phone lot. She makes friends, and they get along.
well, that sounds like an awesome story, and we would love to invite you to go ahead and read a selection for
Oh,
our viewers to kind of give them a taste of what the story is like. So I'll go ahead and we'll share an image of the book cover, and Greta will go ahead and read from the cell phone lot.
right. I'll just read a short chapter. The chapters are very short. All right. Chapter 2. Jessica loved her job. For about a year, she worked at all 5 stores. She read about new makeup lines. She ordered makeup and bath products from the main office in Dallas. She decided how to display them in each store. She did makeovers for customers. One lady bought over $100 worth of cosmetics after a makeover. Jessica answered questions and made suggestions. She felt great about herself. Each store was different. One store in the historic part of town had mostly older customers. The men mainly wanted shampoo, while the women wanted makeup. Another store near the college had mostly young female customers. They wanted makeup and perfume. Jessica made good money. Brandon, who was a lawyer, made a lot more. Veronica, who was still in college, studied engineering. She told Jessica, I have a summer job at an engineering company. I'll make more than you. Jessica smiled. Veronica just wanted to believe that. Jessica saw her father once or twice a week. Over dinner, Juan Vasquez listened to Jessica's stories about work. He said, "That's great, Jessica. You seem happy." Then he got quiet again. Jessica washed the dishes. Then she kissed her father before she went home. She had an apartment at the newest building in town. She didn't know anyone yet. Her neighbors were all young professionals. They were always in a hurry, carrying lattes or texting on their expensive smartphones. So, with all this new brightness in her life, what went wrong? It all started with the manager's daughter at one of the stores. Against wintergreen drugstore rules, the manager hired his own daughter as an employee. The girl went to college but couldn't find a job after she graduated. Her name was Cammy. Cammy had blonde hair and pink lips. Her eyes were blue and hard. She always looked angry. She sometimes had bad skin. Jessica once suggested some skincare ideas, but Cammy said, "I know more than you." Then she turned and walked away. Whenever Jessica visited that store, she found Cammy in the makeup section. Cammy picked things up and put them back down. Once or twice, Jessica saw Cammy put something in her pocket. Cammy saw her looking and said, "What are you looking at?" Jessica said nothing. "I have a question for you, since you know so much," said Cammy. "Why do you have this makeup so far away from the door?" She pointed at a new line of makeup from London. "I don't know why it's there," said Jessica. "That's not where I put it last week." "Ha!" said Cammy. Then she walked away again. Jessica spent an hour putting the display back in the right place. Then she wrote what happened in her notebook. Next, Cammy told her father that Jessica smoked, that she smelled bad. "Who would buy beauty products from her?" she said. Jessica never smoked at work. She shampooed her hair every day. She didn't know how Cammy knew she smoked. Was Cammy going through her purse in the back room? Then this morning, the manager walked up to Jessica and said, "Come with me." Jessica stopped working and followed him to the back office. "Explain this," he said. He pointed at her bag. It was full of makeup and perfume from the store. How did it get there? Jessica didn't know. "I didn't put that there," she said. "Please leave," the manager said. "I'm calling Dallas." And now Jessica's life was over.
That was great. And I
That
love,
poor girl.
I know, poor girl. I love though, it is an interesting story. I think it's something that anyone would enjoy reading. And I think it's just so important that resources like this are available to adult learners.
Yeah.
And that brings me to a question from one of our viewers.
Oh,
Um, what books would you recommend for English language learners who want to improve their reading?
oh, mine, of course. Oh, yeah. Um, I think that you should always start with what is most interesting to you or what is of greatest need. All right. So maybe you love magazines. You want to know how to read recipes. You want to read magazines to get beauty tips. You want to read magazines about how to do things like change the oil in your car, or even better, you're online and you want to not just see a YouTube, but you want to read something about how to change the oil in your car or how to do something that's important. So start with what you are most interested in.
Yeah.
But I would argue very strongly that there's always a place for a good narrative story in someone's life. Um, and you just find a book that you love, like any of the ones that I've written. But there's if you just look at the publisher, for example, Gemma Media, they have a lot of books by different authors that aren't that expensive. and also Ways Goose Press, which is the other publisher that I work with. Again, those books are not that expensive, and you can just slip it in your pocket, and
Yeah.
you
And
know,
I think
that's,
it's great to mention also to our
have
viewers, a lot of these books are also available digitally at an even
yes,
lower cost. So you can even get these books and read them on your cell phone.
yeah. But it's true. If you just have a good narrative, a lot of times I think that we can get a lot from other people's narratives, other people's stories.
Yeah.
But just always keep it in your pocket and just read a few lines at a time. Those are really, really good. But another important thing is if you can, try to listen to an audio reading of the text and then read it at the same time visually.
Yeah.
And don't try to push yourself, don't try to read fast, just read and listen at the same time. That really increases fluency and enjoyment, I think.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe really struggling with reading? They find it, uh, it's not enjoyable. They feel discouraged and they want to give up. What advice would you give?
That to me means that they're not fluent readers yet, right? And so to me, fluency means enjoyment, it means ease. So you can just really get into the story and focus on the important things, not just, decoding words, which is always a struggle.
Yeah.
So again, I would, find the easiest books that you can. There are a lot of online sources as well of easy texts, but find a story or a narrative where you have several paragraphs. And if there are only 3 or 4 words that you don't understand, then that is the right level for reading fluency development. But try to, read that and then listen at the same time, and then that's going to become a lot easier. Sometimes the difficulty comes from just not being able to figure out how do I sound this word out? What does that, how do I say that? What does that sound like in spoken language? That helps a lot to make those connections.
Mhm.
Either have someone read out loud for you that passage, not just the word, but the passage that it's in, at least 5 or 6 sentences, or get an audio file that goes with the book. And in the case of Gemma Media, the publishers, for example, of the cell phone book, their audio files are free online. Yeah, they're free.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, I guess one of the last things I wanted to ask you was you do have a lot of other great books that our students might be interested in, and you had a couple in particular that you wanted to share a little bit about. Would you
Yeah.
mind telling us what the title is and a short synopsis so we can share this with our students?
Happy to. One of them is called Lights Saw Point. Right. It's interesting. I have to move in the right direction here. Go this way. Okay, go ahead. Lights
Okay.
Saw Point. And this is actually book one, and then there's a sequel called Living at Trace. And both of these books are about a man named Brian Longfield, and he's this guy who's 55, 60 years old. He's really good at repairing things, and he works as a park campground host at Trace State Park. There's an actual park in northern Mississippi State, and he's there year round, but mostly in the winter time. He's there. I actually met a man who I modeled this on, and he's taking care of his wife who cannot move around very well. They're living in a trailer. But in the state of Mississippi, most Americans don't know this state very well. It has so many negative stereotypes. It is, in fact, a beautiful state and very diverse. But what happens in the winter is that all of these elderly people from Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, they come down to Mississippi and they camp semi permanently at Mississippi State Parks. They're there for 5 months and they pay $200 a month with utilities and they enjoy the warm weather. It rains in Mississippi, it snows in Minnesota, you
Yeah.
know. So he just has some interesting things go on, and he finds out more about for example, Native American sites that are in the park that he didn't know about before. In the sequel, he's gone through some major changes. His wife has passed away, but he has a sister-in-law and her two kids who come to visit. And together they all figure out how to rescue a young boy from his evil father, Dave Sykes. So yeah, there's always an element of like crime
Yeah.
in my stories, but it's a very interesting setting.
Yeah.
And Mississippi and these southeastern states, most Americans don't know them very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to recreate the diversity, but also the amazing history of this area.
Yeah, and I've noticed just reading some of your different book descriptions, there are they're set in a lot of different places. So I'm sure it's a great opportunity also for people who are new to the U.S. to kind of familiarize themselves with different states and different cultures within the United States.
Yeah, I didn't want to do California, didn't want to do New York, didn't want to do Dallas. I wanted to do something, small town life, historical small
Yeah.
town life. One of my books, the earliest one, is set in 1833 in my hometown, Dubuque, Iowa, and it's about African American settlers. There were African American settlers there at the beginning of this town. Yeah.
Well, we were so grateful to have you here with us today, Greta. Are there any final things you would like to say before we close?
You guys are doing a wonderful job, and I like the fact that you focus on all aspects of literacy, not just reading literacy, but how to get by in life and how to make good decisions about your life. So I'm really impressed with the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Greta. We really appreciate it and appreciate the work you put into creating these awesome resources for our students and all English language learners and adult literacy students. Thank you so much again for joining us today, and we hope that you can join us again in the future.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.